Well, welcome again. Let's continue where we have left. Let me tell you again that with the marginalists basically solved the problem of explaining how usefulness of water and diamond are related to each other by basically saying that it's not the average usefulness of water and average usefulness of diamond that are determining the prices, rather the marginal usefulness of the water, which is defined as marginal utility of water in pure economic terms. And marginal utility of diamond determines their prices. So diamond is expensive because its marginal utility, the utility of the last unit of diamond, is higher than the marginal utility of water, the utility you got from the last unit of water. Of course, you might ask the question. Let me ask that question and leave there, just to make you think about it. If you want to think about it, of course. If you don't want to, you don't need to do that. Why is the people are consuming or producing or continue to find water up to the point where its marginal utility gets very low, very, very useless? Why people are choosing to find diamonds? Not up to the point its values goes very low, but at the point where their marginal value, the value of the last unit, is still very high. Let's go a little bit further and say, I mean, in case of diamond, maybe it's not might be that much possible to find as much diamond as you want. Although you can still increase your effort to find more diamonds, but that might help. That could be helpful. However, in case of production, you can do that. I mean, why people are not producing expensive cars, for example, up to the point where their value falls and their price falls to very low value, while they decide to produce, for example, these pens to the point where their value falls to very low value. So basically, even if prices and marginal utilities are connected to each other, but as it is stated by the marginalists, is it really the real the factor which is determining, I mean, the price, which is active factor behind the price, basically? Is the price shaped by the marginal utility people have to for those products, for those, let's say, goods, or even though the equilibrium holds, is it something else that is actually being determining the active factor, which is increasing and decreasing the prices? This is the question I want you left with, and I will come to continue. Okay, now we are talking. We will mention the first law marginal economists are stating. It's generally accepted that marginal utility of most goods fall as number of units of goods consumed increase. So when I drink my first coffee, I might get a lot of utility from it. When I got my second coffee, utility I got is likely to decrease according to this logic. Why? Because basically I already have tasted the coffee. I already had this first excitement, and basically the second cup of coffee, and I already had satisfied my thirst. At least, even if I'm still thirsty, at least the first drink, when I'm really very, very thirsty, is gives me more satisfaction compared with the second glass after I had at least a little bit of a drink. Well, another explanation is for the products. If I have a particular product, for example, let's say wood, for example, I can use wood first for the most useful purposes, then the name wood, the extra wood I have for the second most beneficial purposes. So the more wood I have, the more wood I use, the less will be well, the less will be the usefulness of the purposes I use my wood for. If I have a lot of wood, the last bits of wood can be used for very, very well, well, not so important. I mean, for purposes with negligible importance. I don't know. First, I might build, for example, furniture, and then I might basically burn wood. I don't know. Then maybe I don't know. Just use it as a toy, maybe. I don't know. So that's the idea. I mean, the more of a good you have, the less will be its usefulness of the last unit you use it. Well, there can be a counter-argument stated for the principle of diminishing marginal utility, and that counter-argument is basically, in some cases, consuming certain goods might basically make you learn it better. For example, if I go and ski first time properly, it won't give me much utility. If you first play violin, which I have done, actually, it just doesn't. It creates very bad sounds. But the second time you play violin, I mean, the more you learn playing violin, the more utility you got it because you have mastered it. Same thing is for skiing. Same thing is for the, for example, horse riding, for example. Even in case of the certain things, for example, the more coffee you drink, you might basically. That's not for me, but some people say you might be able to get the taste much better if you drink more coffee. I mean, the very little parts of those tastes. So the more you learn how to taste coffee, the pleasure you might get higher. So that's the idea of, I mean, maybe marginal utility of the goods may be increasing, at least not always decreasing. I mean, if you drink 100 cups of coffee per day, probably it will not continue increase. But for a while, it might be increasing, and that increase might be important. Because instead of dividing my time between horse riding, skiing, swimming, I might concentrate and just do one. Have one hobby, for example, because I mean, doing one hobby repeatedly might give me more utility. For example, I might rather ride horses. But in microeconomics, mainstream macroeconomics, at least in the central theories of mainstream macroeconomics, assume that even if those goods that have increasing marginal utility for a while exists, those goods are exception. So most of the goods, at least vast majority of the goods, have a diminishing marginal utility as a property. So it is safe to assume that marginal utility of the goods are continuously decreasing. I'm leaving evaluation to you, and you can learn more on the arguments of both sides, but this is accepted. Although challenged also by some economists, but accepted also by majority of the economics. But it's always okay to think about, question even the most accepted scientific truth. Even as a consumer of the science, that's a good activity. At the end of the day, of course, if you can only be if you will be against the science, if you want to improve or change a scientific fact, you need to come with proofs. But first, in order to find those proofs, you need to start thinking about the possible mistakes or possible voids in scientific statements. So then this might be a point you might think of. If you would like to, if you don't want to, you don't need to, of course. So basically, diminishing marginal utility means the marginal utility an average consumer gets from a typical good will get smaller as you consume more units. In the first unit it was 20, second 18, third 16, fourth 14, fifth 10, 6, 4. So now consumption bundle. Consumption bundle is basically a consumer consumes not one good, which is usually consumers don't consume one good, multiple goods. Any combination of different quantities of the goods form a consumption bundle. For example, 3 units of food and 10 units of clothing is a consumption bundle. Here I define the goods broadly. So of course, if you define them broadly, for food, for example, you cannot say provide conventional units like kilogram because different types of foods are combined. Kilogram is meaningless in that sense. Same is for clothing. In more advanced microeconomics studies, usually it is assumed that there are n number of goods. You don't give actually a number how much goods are in a consumption bundle, and you basically model your consumption theories in that way. Here, of course, we are just looking to the rules, so we don't have a detailed model. But basically, still, of course, each consumer, we assume, every year or any time frame you specify, which might be month, day, week, year, they decide to buy different goods, and the goods all the goods they buy can be hypothetically combined in a consumption bundle. It is as if you might put everything together. You cannot do it, of course, because you might buy a car, for example. You cannot put the car to the basket, but you might think as if everything you buy is in a basket, even the things that are not tangible, like, for example, movie tickets, for example, or bus ride, for example. Think everything is in a bundle. The question is, how are consumers determine what will be in the bundle? I mean, how many of each consumer goods will be in the bundle? So if there are 10 bus rides and 5 cups of coffee, for example, why it is 10 to 5? Is there a rule which shows us how those numbers are determined by the customer? Consumer, I'm sorry. So, of course, this is an interesting, actually, activity. You have marginal utility of different goods, and you need to find a consumption bundle that gives our consumers 210 units of utility. No, these are marginal utilities. So in order to solve this question, you first need to find the total utility our consumer get by consuming different quantities of these products. For example, if our consumer consumes 2 units of pretzel, in that case, he will get 90 units of utility. Consuming 3 units of pretzel will give the same consumer 50, 40, 30 together, 120 units of utility. Actually, we are very close to the end of this video part. Let me do this in the next part. See you in the next part.